The great crystal dome of Federation Command buzzed with nervous energy. War leaders from across the galaxy sat around a massive circular table that glowed with star maps and battle reports. The news was all bad. Admiral Karath slammed 4 of his tentacles on the table surface. His purple skin had turned almost black with stress. The Vrak took 3 more systems yesterday, he announced to the room. Our best fleets lasted exactly 2 hours against their dreadnoughts. General Vex hissed through his sharp teeth. His reptilian eyes swept over the holographic displays showing red enemy territory spreading like blood across the galaxy. They have weapons we cannot understand. Ships that repair themselves. Soldiers that feel no pain or fear. How many worlds have we lost now? Asked Commander Zilak, her insect wings twitching with anxiety. 47 systems in the past month alone, answered the war computer in its cold mechanical voice. At this rate, the Vrak Empire will control the entire galaxy within 6 Earth years. Ambassador Jiho sat quietly in his simple gray uniform among all the elaborate military decorations and alien battle armor. His small human form looked almost fragile next to the towering alien warriors, but his dark eyes stayed calm as he listened to each desperate report. We need bigger weapons, General Vex declared, his claws scratching the metal table. More ships. Better armor. The humans have some advanced technology, do they not? All eyes turned to Jiho. He nodded slowly. We do have some advanced systems, yes. Then share them. Admiral Karatha's tentacles waved frantically. This is no time for secrets between allies. The Vrak will destroy us all if we do not work together. We estimate we would need at least 10,000 new warships to match Vrak firepower, said Commander Zilak, studying the tactical displays. How quickly can Earth build them? Jiho was quiet for a long moment. Around the table alien faces showed growing hope. Surely the mysterious humans had secret superweapons hidden away. Everyone knew humans were clever with technology. Actually, Jiho said carefully, we were thinking of sending a small diplomatic team instead. The silence in the room was so complete that the hum of the war computers seemed loud. Then General Vex started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. Diplomatic team? Vex repeated, still chuckling. Ambassador, I think the translation might be wrong. We are talking about the Vrak Empire. They do not negotiate. They do not surrender. They conquer or they destroy. That is all they know. Admiral Karatha's tentacles curled with what humans might recognize as disbelief. My friend, perhaps you do not understand the situation. The Vrak have never, in their entire history, made peace with anyone. They expand their empire or they die fighting. There is no middle ground. We understand the Vrak reputation, Jiho said calmly. But we still think a cultural exchange might work. Commander Zilak's wings stopped twitching entirely. Cultural exchange? You want to send artists and musicians against the most ruthless military force in galactic history? Something like that, yes. The war leaders looked at each other with expressions of growing alarm. Had the humans lost their minds? Were they planning to surrender their entire species to save themselves? Ambassador, Admiral Karath said very slowly as if speaking to a confused child, the Vrak Empire has destroyed civilizations that lasted millions of years. They turned the crystal cities of Altair into glass dust. They made the warrior clans of Redhan into slaves. They do not care about art or music or culture. They care about conquest. General Vex leaned forward, his reptilian face showing something almost like sympathy. Humans are young in this galaxy. You have not seen what the Vrak do to worlds that try to reason with them. They do not kill quickly. They make examples. The last species that sent diplomats to the Vrak, Commander Zilak added quietly, had their ambassadors returned in small boxes. One piece at a time. Over several months. Jiho listened to all of this without changing expression. His human face showed no fear, no doubt, no anger. Just patient attention. We appreciate your concerns, he said when the aliens finished sharing their warnings. But Earth would still like permission to try our approach. Your approach will get you all killed, Admiral Karath said flatly. And then the Vrak will come for the rest of us anyway, except now we will be missing whatever secret weapons you humans might have contributed to the war effort. We do not have secret super weapons, Jiho admitted. We have something else. What? Demanded General Vex. What could possibly work against the Vrak Empire if military force cannot stop them? Jiho smiled for the first time during the entire meeting. It was a warm, confident smile that somehow made the huge alien warriors feel very uncomfortable. We have something no one has ever tried using against the Vrak before, he said. We have the belief that everyone, even enemies, deserves a chance to choose something better. The silence returned to the crystal dome. The war computers hummed. The holographic star maps continued showing red Vrak territory spreading across the galaxy like a disease. Finally, Admiral Karath spoke. "You are either completely insane or you know something about warfare that the rest of us have never learned." "Maybe both," Jiho agreed cheerfully. "May we have permission to try?" The single Earth ship dropped out of hyperspace above Vrak Prime like a tiny silver dot against the massive red planet. The Vrak defense fleet surrounded it immediately, their black warships bristling with weapons that could turn the small vessel into space dust in seconds. On the bridge of the Supreme War Command ship, officers stared at their screens in confusion. The human vessel showed no weapon signatures. No shield generators. No armor plating. It looked more like a passenger transport than a military craft. "Supreme War Leader Gordhak," reported his scanner officer, "the human ship is not armed. It appears to be civilian?" Gordhak's massive frame filled the command chair. His gray skin was covered in ritual battle scars, and his 4 yellow eyes studied the tactical display with growing bewilderment. In 300 years of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. "Are they surrendering already?" he growled through his sharp teeth. "No, Supreme One. They are requesting permission to land. They say they wish to establish something called a cultural center." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of war machines. Gordhak's officers exchanged confused glances. In their language there was no word for cultural center. The closest translation meant place where weak things gather. "They want to do what?" Gordhak asked. The communication officer played the human transmission again. Captain Nari's voice came through the speakers, speaking in perfect Vrak language that somehow sounded gentle despite the harsh words. "Great Supreme War Leader Gordhak, we come not as enemies but as students. We have heard of your empire's magnificent strength and superior civilization. Before our inevitable defeat, we humbly request permission to learn from your people. We wish to understand your greatness so that we may tell our children about it in the years before your conquest reaches Earth." Gordhak listened to this speech 3 times. Each time it made less sense. "They want to learn from us?" he asked his aide. "Before we destroy them?" "That appears to be their request, Supreme One." "And they brought no weapons?" "None that we can detect. Our deep scans show musical instruments, cooking equipment, art supplies, and what appears to be recreational sporting goods." Gordhak stared at the small human ship for a long moment. In all his campaigns, enemies had either fought desperately or begged for mercy. None had ever asked to learn about Vrak culture while waiting to be conquered. This is either the strangest surrender in military history, he decided, or the humans are even more foolish than we thought. Either way it will be amusing. Grant them permission to land. Give them a small district in the capital. Let them build their cultural center. It will entertain our people before we finish conquering their worlds. The human ship landed in a minor spaceport usually reserved for supply vessels. A crowd of curious Vrak civilians gathered to watch. They expected to see either terrified prisoners or dangerous warriors. Instead they saw something completely unexpected. Captain Nari stepped off the ship first. She was small by Vrak standards, barely reaching the chest of an average Vrak civilian. Her black hair was tied back simply, and she wore a plain blue uniform with no visible weapons or armor. But what shocked the watching Vrak was her expression. She looked genuinely happy to be there. Behind her came the strangest invasion force in galactic history. Musician Teho carried a collection of stringed instruments that gleamed in the red sunlight of Vrak Prime. Chef Yuna wheeled out containers of ingredients and cooking tools, humming quietly to herself. Artist Wu Jin sketched the Vrak architecture as he walked, his eyes bright with interest. Teacher Soyoung carried boxes of what appeared to be children's games and educational materials. Athletes Hannah and Seojun bounced a ball between them as they walked, demonstrating some kind of human sport. Writer Seojun carried electronic tablets loaded with thousands of human stories. The Vrak civilians watched this parade of humans with growing confusion. Where were the battle flags? The military formations? The desperate final charges that usually marked the end of a conquered species? Instead, the humans approached the nearest Vrak civilians and began offering small gifts. Colorful scarves. Simple pieces of jewelry. Handmade items that served no military purpose whatsoever. "Greetings," Captain Nari said to the crowd in careful Vrak language. "We are honored to visit your beautiful world. Would you help us understand how to be good neighbors?" An old Vrak merchant stepped forward cautiously. In his long life, he had seen many conquered peoples brought to the capital as slaves or prisoners. None had ever asked about being good neighbors. You are the human warriors?" he asked. We are human representatives, Nari corrected gently. We came to learn about your people and share our own culture. Would you like to see some human music? Before the merchant could answer, Tejo began playing a soft melody on one of his instruments. The sound was unlike anything the Vrak had ever heard. Their military music was all drums and horns designed to inspire aggression. This was something different. Something that made the listeners feel calm and thoughtful. A small crowd gathered around the humans. Children pushed to the front, their large eyes wide with curiosity. Yuna began unpacking some of her cooking supplies and started preparing simple snacks using local ingredients combined with human spices. What are they doing? Whispered a young Vrak mother to her friend. I think, her friend whispered back, they are trying to be friendly. Within hours, news of the strange human invasion spread throughout the capital. The humans had set up their cultural center in an abandoned warehouse. Instead of fortifying it, they left the doors open and invited anyone to visit. Supreme War Leader Gordhak received reports of long lines of Vrak civilians waiting to enter the human facility. Not to see prisoners or trophies of war, but to experience something they had never encountered before. Strangers who seemed genuinely interested in making friends. Let them play their games, Gordhak decided. Soon enough, they will understand that friendship means nothing against superior firepower. But deep in his fortress, for the first time in years, Gordhak found himself curious about what the humans were actually doing in their little cultural center. The human cultural center buzzed with activity from sunrise to sunset. What started as curious glances had grown into long lines of Vrak civilians waiting their turn to experience something completely new in their ordered world. Young Vrak warrior Thex stood outside the center for 3 days before finally entering. His military training told him this was enemy territory, but his curiosity proved stronger than his fear. Inside, he found musician Tejo sitting cross-legged on the floor, teaching a small group of Vrak children how to make simple melodies on handmade instruments. Music is about expression, Tejo explained in careful Vrak language. Each person can create something different. Something that comes from inside them. Thex had never heard such words before. In Vrak society, everything came from outside commands. Soldiers followed orders. Workers followed schedules. Citizens followed laws. Nothing came from inside individual people. What if someone makes ugly music? Asked a Vrak child. Tejo smiled. Then they learn and try again. Or maybe their ugly music is beautiful to someone else. There is no wrong way to express yourself. That night, Thex lay awake in his military barracks, humming one of the melodies he had heard. For the first time in his life, he wondered what sounds might come from inside his own mind instead of from military orders. Across the city, factory worker Zeph sat in her tiny apartment, staring at a small drawing that artist Wu Jin had given her. It showed her own face, but somehow Wu Jin had captured something in her eyes that she did not know existed. A sadness. A longing for something more than endless work shifts. You have artist hands, Wu Jin had told her when he gave her the drawing. Would you like to learn to draw? Zeph looked at her hands. They were rough from factory work, stained with machine oil. She had never imagined they could create something beautiful. The idea felt dangerous and exciting at the same time. In the government district, Clerk Rax found himself making secret visits to the human center during his lunch breaks. Teacher Soyoung had introduced him to something called personal choice. She had shown him a collection of human stories where characters decided their own futures instead of having them assigned by authorities. What would you choose to do? Soyoung had asked him, if you could choose anything? The question haunted Rax. He had been assigned to data processing 20 years ago. He had never considered that there might be other possibilities. But the human stories spoke of people who changed their lives, who found new purposes, who made their own decisions about happiness. Chef Yuna's cooking demonstrations drew the largest crowds. Vrak military rations were designed for efficiency, not pleasure. The same gray protein paste and vitamin supplements every day for every citizen. But Yuna showed them how combining simple ingredients could create flavors that made people smile. Cooking is about caring for others, she explained to a group of fascinated Vrak mothers. When you make food with love, people can taste the love. One mother, Vex, raised her hand nervously. We are not supposed to waste time on unnecessary food preparation. Efficiency is most important. But what if happiness is more important than efficiency? Yuna asked gently. The question spread through the crowd like ripples in water. What if happiness mattered more than efficiency? The idea was so foreign that many Vrak could barely understand it, but they found themselves thinking about it for days afterward. Athletes Hannah and Seojun taught Vrak children games that had no winners or losers. Just fun. Just movement and laughter and cooperation. Vrak education focused on competition and ranking. Every child learned their place in the hierarchy from an early age. But these human games were different. The goal is for everyone to have fun, Hannah explained to a group of confused young Vrak. No one needs to be better than anyone else. But how do we know who wins? Asked the child. Everyone wins when everyone enjoys playing, Seo-jun answered. The children played these strange cooperative games and discovered something unexpected. They liked each other more when they were not competing. They felt happier when everyone succeeded together. Word of these activities reached the ears of Vrak authorities. Supervisor Korth visited the center to investigate what he assumed would be obvious enemy propaganda. Instead, he found storyteller Seo-jun reading tales about forgiveness, second chances, and people choosing to help their enemies become friends. These stories are unrealistic, Korth announced to the gathered Vrak. Enemies remain enemies. That is natural law. Is it? Seo-jun asked politely. What if enemies are just friends who have not learned to trust each other yet? Korth left the center feeling disturbed. The human stories made war seem like a choice instead of an inevitable fact of life. They suggested that conflict could end not through victory, but through understanding. Within weeks, strange changes began appearing throughout Vrak society. Workers started decorating their stations with small personal items. Children asked questions instead of just accepting orders. Young people gathered in small groups to discuss the ideas they had encountered at the human center. Soldier Drex shocked his commanding officer by asking, "Why do we fight so many wars? What are we trying to achieve?" Factory supervisor Loth found herself thinking about worker happiness instead of just production numbers. Government clerk next started wondering if there might be better ways to organize society than through strict hierarchy and fear. The infection of ideas spread quietly through the capital. Not through force or commands, but through curiosity and imagination. The humans had introduced something more dangerous than any weapon: the possibility that life could be different than it had always been. Supreme War Leader Gorthak began receiving reports of declining military morale and increasing questions from citizens about government policies. His advisors suggested closing the Human Cultural Center immediately. But Gorthak found himself curious about these ideas that could change minds without violence. What kind of power was this that the humans possessed? Reports flooded into Supreme War Leader Gorthak's command center like an avalanche of bad news. Each morning brought fresh evidence that something was terribly wrong with his perfect military empire. Sector 7 factory workers have stopped production, announced his aide, Lieutenant Morgak, reading from a long list of problems. They demand time for what they call creative expression during work hours. Gorthak's 4 yellow eyes narrowed with anger. Send enforcement troops. Restore order immediately. We tried, Supreme One. The enforcement troops joined the workers. They are now making what they call art together. The massive war leader felt something he had never experienced before: confusion mixed with fear. His iron grip on the empire was slipping, and he did not understand how or why. What about the mining colonies on Vrak 7? Lieutenant Morgak consulted another report. The miners have declared their independence. They say they choose happiness over endless digging for empire resources. They are growing flowers in the old mine shafts. Flowers? Gorthak roared. What use are flowers? Send the battle fleet. Supreme One, Morgak said carefully, the battle fleet. They refuse to fire on flower gardens. Admiral Zek says it would be wrong to destroy beauty. Gorthak stared at his aide in complete silence. In 300 years of military conquest, no Vrak soldier had ever refused a direct order. The very concept was impossible. Yet here it was happening across his empire. On Vrak Prime itself, the situation grew worse every day. Young Vrak soldiers stationed at the Human Cultural Center had begun talking with the humans instead of just guarding them. They asked questions about peace, about choice, about what life might be like without constant war. Sergeant Thex, once a model warrior, now spent his off-duty hours learning to play human music. When ordered to report for weapon training, he asked his commanding officer a question that shocked everyone within hearing distance. Why do we need so many weapons if we are not planning to hurt anyone? Major Krell struggled to answer. The official response was that weapons maintained order and defended the empire. But Thex's innocent question made him realize he had never actually thought about why they needed to defend against anything. Who exactly were they defending against? Everyone they met, they conquered. Where was the threat that required such massive military preparation? Because that is how things are done, Major Krell finally answered, but his voice lacked conviction. But what if things could be done differently? Thex asked. The humans showed us stories about people who solved problems by talking instead of fighting. What if we tried talking? Major Krell reported this conversation to his superiors, but found that many other officers were asking similar questions. The infection of human ideas had spread deep into the military structure. In the government buildings, civil administrators faced their own crisis. Citizens were questioning laws that had existed for centuries. They wanted to know why certain activities were forbidden, why they could not choose their own jobs, why happiness was considered less important than efficiency. Clerk Rax had started holding secret meetings where Vrac citizens discussed human concepts like individual rights and personal freedom. These meetings grew larger each week as more people discovered that they were not alone in feeling dissatisfied with their rigidly controlled lives. What if we could choose our own leaders? Rax suggested during one gathering. What if we could vote for people who would make decisions based on what makes us happy instead of what makes us productive? The idea spread through the capital like wildfire. Citizens began forming groups to discuss these revolutionary concepts. They called themselves choice circles, and met in secret to imagine what their society might look like if it were built around human ideas of cooperation and individual expression. Supreme War Leader Gordhak tried traditional solutions to restore order. He increased military patrols, issued stronger punishments, and made speeches about duty and obedience. Nothing worked. Each harsh measure only made more citizens curious about the human alternatives they had been hearing about. The breaking point came when 3 entire military battalions laid down their weapons and declared they would no longer participate in conquest missions. They had been ordered to attack a peaceful trading planet, but the soldiers had spent time at the Human Cultural Center and learned about concepts like mercy and protection of innocence. "We became soldiers to protect the Empire," their leader, Commander Drex, announced. "But the humans taught us that real protection means helping people, not hurting them. We will protect the trading planet instead of attacking it." When Gordhak sent other military units to arrest the rebels, those soldiers also refused orders. The rebellion was not violent. No one fought. They simply stopped obeying commands that contradicted their new understanding of right and wrong. Reports arrived from across the Empire. Entire planets were declaring independence, not through warfare but through collective choice. Military governors found themselves ruling populations that politely refused to cooperate with imperial policies. The Vrak Empire, which had seemed unbreakable through military might, was dissolving because its people had learned they could choose something different. Lieutenant Morgak entered Gordhak's command chamber with the final report. "Supreme One, we have lost effective control of 60% of Imperial territory. The populations have not fought us. They have simply stopped being part of the Empire." Gordhak sat in his command chair, surrounded by the massive war machines that had conquered half the galaxy, and realized that all his weapons were useless against an enemy that fought with ideas instead of force. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did a handful of unarmed humans destroy what took us centuries to build?" But even as he asked the question, Gordhak found himself thinking about the Human Cultural Center and wondering what these strange concepts of choice and happiness might feel like. The mighty Vrak Empire was cracking apart, one changed mind at a time. The Great War Palace of Vrak Prime had been transformed into something unrecognizable. Where once military banners hung from the walls, now colorful artwork created by Vrak citizens decorated the halls. The throne room where Supreme War Leader Gordhak had planned conquests now served as a community meeting space where former subjects gathered to make decisions together. Gordhak himself sat on a simple wooden chair across from Ambassador Jiho at a small table in what had once been the strategic planning chamber. The massive war computers had been replaced with comfortable seating areas where Vrak families came to read human stories and learn about cooperation. 6 months had passed since the Vrak Empire officially dissolved itself. Not through military defeat or violent revolution, but through a collective decision by its people to try something completely different. They called their new society the Vrak Commonwealth, and they spent their days learning how to make choices together instead of following orders from above. "I still do not understand," Gordhak said to Jiho, pouring tea from a simple ceramic pot that had been made in the Cultural Center's pottery workshop. His massive warrior's hands looked strange performing this delicate task, but he had learned to find peace in small, gentle actions. "You defeated the greatest military empire in galactic history," he continued. "You conquered us more completely than we ever conquered anyone else. But you never fired a weapon. You never threatened us. You never even raised your voice. How is this possible?" Jiho accepted the tea with a grateful nod. Through the large windows of the former war room, they could see Vrak children playing the cooperative games that Hannah and Seojun had taught them. Former soldiers had joined the games, their laughter mixing with the children's voices in a sound that had never been heard on Vrak Prime before. "We did not defeat you, Gordhak," Jiho said gently. "We helped you defeat the part of yourselves that was making you unhappy." "But we were not unhappy," Gordhak protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "We were the strongest empire in the galaxy. We controlled hundreds of worlds. We had unlimited power." "Did power make your people smile?" Jiho asked. "Did conquest make them sing? Did military victory help them sleep peacefully at night?" Gordhak was quiet for a long moment. He remembered the old days when his subjects had obeyed every order without question, but he could not remember ever seeing joy in their faces. He had mistaken fear and obedience for contentment. "The humans showed us something we had never seen before," he admitted. "They showed us what happiness looked like. Once we saw it, we realized we had been living without it our entire lives." Through another window they could see former factory worker Zeph teaching a group of children how to draw. Her hands, once stained with machine oil, now created beautiful pictures that made people smile. Former clerk Rax had become a storyteller, sharing tales about the importance of choice and freedom with audiences who hung on every word. "But why?" Gordhak asked. "Why did your people care about our happiness? We were your enemies. We were planning to conquer your worlds and enslave your people. Why did you help us instead of fighting us?" Jiho set down his teacup and looked directly into Gordhak's 4 yellow eyes. "Because we learned something important long ago in human history. We discovered that the strongest victory comes not from destroying enemies, but from helping them become friends." "That makes no sense from a military perspective," Gordhak said, though he was beginning to understand it from a human perspective. "It makes perfect sense," Jiho replied with a smile. "Think about it. When you conquer someone with force, you create new enemies. The conquered people hate you and plot revenge. Their children grow up wanting to fight you. You must spend forever watching your back and maintaining control through fear." Gordhak nodded slowly. This had indeed been the Vrak way. Constant vigilance. Endless security. Always prepared for the next rebellion or revenge attack. "But when you help enemies become friends," Jiho continued, "you create allies instead. People who were once threats become people who want to help you. Instead of spending energy on defense, you can spend it on building better lives for everyone." "And that is why humans are unique?" Gordhak asked. "Humans discovered that caring about other people's well-being actually makes us stronger, not weaker. Most species think that helping enemies is foolish. But we learned that it is the smartest strategy possible. When everyone is happy, no one wants to fight anymore." Outside, former Supreme Admiral Zex was teaching a group of young Vrak about peaceful exploration instead of military conquest. Former soldiers had become teachers, artists, and community organizers. The entire warrior class had transformed into protectors and helpers instead of conquerors. "Your people gave up the strongest empire in the galaxy to become farmers, artists, and storytellers," Gordhak observed. "Do you ever regret choosing weakness over strength?" Jiho's smile grew wider. "Look around you, Gordhak. Look at your people. Look at their faces. Are we weaker now or stronger?" Gordhak looked through the windows at former subjects who were now free citizens. He saw faces full of genuine happiness, creativity, and hope. He heard laughter and music and the sound of people working together because they wanted to, not because they had to. "Stronger," he admitted quietly. "We are all stronger. That is why humans always win in the end," Jiho explained. "Not because we fight better but because we care better. Caring about others makes everyone undefeatable, because no one can remain hostile toward people who genuinely want them to be happy." The Vrak Commonwealth flourished. Former enemy worlds became close allies. Peace spread throughout the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple human understanding that the best way to win any war is to help everyone involved discover they do not need to fight at all.